Hey folks, this is Jake from So We Flow, and you're listening to the Why We Move podcast. We speak to incredible movers from all sorts of disciplines to share their stories and give you practical and inspirational advice on movement and living a happy, healthy life. We welcome beginners and experts, introverts and extroverts, fanatics and casuals to better themselves and inspire others. Today I'm talking to the incredible Miles Mortensen, and we talked about rocket yoga, we got in deep with breathwork, and we even discussed the rat race that is being a yoga teacher in the city of London.
I finally settled into a new house, which is quite lucky. It's right next to like Try Yoga in Shoreditch and everything.
Oh, nice, man. Whereabouts is that?
Like just off Brick Lane.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So just enjoying being able to walk to all my classes and wherever I'm training and stuff. So it's good.
Yeah.
Just making the most of London.
Are you teaching at Try Yoga now?
No. I've recently applied for a cover, but they were like, "Oh, we just did all the rocket inductions, so we'll contact you next time." Which was like,
yeah,
fair.
Who's teaching rocket there now?
I think there's Marcus Still, Alan Ellman, Amy Wiseman, Helen Russell Clark. There's not too many teachers, but yeah, it's becoming it's a style that's just blowing up at the moment here in London. It's crazy.
Yeah. To be honest, like I've never practiced rocket, but I can see the appeal because like when I left London, like before I moved to Cornwall, I was doing like the Mysore Ashtanga classes. And
with Corey?
With Corey, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And I absolutely loved it. And I thought it was something, it was crazy. Just it took you to like a place that I'd never experienced before with yoga, even after doing it for so many years. But I think, you know, like many of us were interested in like different disciplines and everything. And I think doing that with like trying to do like calisthenics, like go to the gym and like go surfing and swimming, like whatever else, like it actually like fucked my body up, to be honest, like a little bit.
I know what you mean. I recently experienced this where I took like 2 weeks out of yoga because of straining my MCL and was just focusing on like calisthenic stuff. But my body felt so much better going back into yoga and doing yoga less, but focusing more on stabilizing the body.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. Like, I think Ashtanga, that Mysore is great, but I don't know how much, like, you're spending an hour and a half to 2 hours just going to end ranges of motion within the joints and tissues. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest, like, I have actually got some injuries that I reckon have come from Mysore that are like, they are chronic now. Like, if I push it too much, like, it'll flare up again. You know, when you think it's gone and then it just comes back super easy. But I think I wasn't helping myself by like going to the gym for 2 hours either. So
like 4 hours each day.
Yeah. But I think it's weird now because now I'm living here. There's no studios near me. And now I've got a baby, like I'm working a lot more than I was then. And just more like responsibility and time to just do what I want, right? And it's so strange because I'm probably I never practice more than like an hour a day now, but like everything is so much better. Like my mobility is better, my strength's better, like my flexibility is better, and it just shows, really, doesn't it? Like more is not better. It just isn't. Like, it's a fact.
It's this interesting thing that we think we have to go to the gym for like 4 hours each day and train, and I think like that works to a certain extent, but then you're just exhausting your body, and then it's like how long before the train falls off the tracks?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like less is more, and practicing for longevity, I think, is that key.
Yeah, I think. I mean, how old are you? Are you 28? Is that right?
28.
28, yeah. Nice. Got it. Yeah, so I'm 30, so like a pretty similar age. But I think even obviously we're still young guns relatively, but
Yeah.
as we get old, like as you get to 30, you kind of, I think you lose some of the ego side of it, pulls back a little bit, and you do actually go, oh, well, what can I actually do every day for the rest of my life, rather than like, those high, like extreme shows of strength and mobility and all that, like they probably won't last. And if they do, it'll be probably to your detriment, rather than that everyday mobility, just being able to move your body in kind of all the ways it's supposed to, is the stuff that'll keep
Yeah.
you healthy, like when you're in your old age and everything.
Yeah, exactly. I think the mid 20 ego begins to drop massively. You hit that point of like, you know what, do I actually need to do this? Like, is this doing anything, or can I just enjoy and practice for a long time? I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
that's it. Like just being able to function on a daily basis.
And and feel good as well. Like,
Yeah.
not just feel capable in your own body.
That was something you said, I think, I'm pretty sure it was you that you said on a post of like the act of training to feel good rather than for the purpose of aesthetics,
Yeah, exactly.
which
Yeah.
is always something I've like, I remember reading that and being like, yeah, like how often do you train to just feel good and enjoyment rather than working towards a goal or for the aesthetics or whatever it is you're achieving?
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, that's become like more and more prominent now, like since becoming a dad, and
Yeah, I can imagine.
just feeling like I have more time restraints, because I don't know. Well, this is the kind of thing I'm going at the moment. It's like, because I was so used to spending so much time practicing, and now it's pulled
Mm,
back, and it's actually been beneficial in all sorts of ways. But I still find it
mm.
hard to break that mindset of like, I almost feel like more needs to be put in to get those things. So I might as well just train to feel good, even though it feels
Yeah,
better.
yeah,
But I don't think that's the reality. I think like, I don't really want to say overtraining, because I think it's a word that's like so different for everyone, isn't it? And it just
yeah.
depends who you are completely. And but focus and like specificity in your training is so good for progress, and you don't even need to have like high volume to get where you want to be if you are specific in what you do.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, training towards a certain goal and doing what, the specifics needed to achieve that
Yeah,
rather than just all over the place.
yeah.
I think
Right,
my
anyway,
hand sent. Yeah, let's go on.
no, well, we're basically in it now. I'm fully. So, Miles, I always like to kick things off by asking, when and how did you get into movement?
Okay. When and how did I get into movement? I guess movement for me was it was always there in my life in one way, from surfing and skateboarding, snowboarding growing up, but it was never there in a sense of like um, athletic training, I
Mm.
guess. Did a little bit stepping in and out for surfing and that. But I would say the real practice began over in the UK and was born out of, I guess, a lot of mental health and body image um, stuff, and began training in my bedroom and exploring yoga, and then just spiraled into the rabbit hole of the movement world from there.
So it was very much just, it kind of happened. Like, how did it become yoga rather than anything else?
I guess it turned more into yoga because it was a world I was familiar with, and this would have been at the age of like 24,
Mm-hmm.
25, somewhere between 20, yeah, 24, 25. Um, it was familiar as my mother was a teacher, so it was something I was aware of the philosophy and benefits around growing up, but never really dipped my toes into,
Yeah,
apart from
sure.
when my mum put me into classes. Um, and I guess the big draw in for me was the mental aspect as much as the physical. So as much as I started with the um, physical practice. It was exploring the philosophies and inquiry into one's nature and oneself, and the meditation all to go along with it, and started to really see, I guess, the benefits of that from being in spaces of a lot of judgment and anxiety, and kind of finding small bits of release from that through its practices. And at that point in time, it's a lot of its philosophies really just kind of resonated with me in that spiritual aspect of looking for something more and looking into the deeper qualities of life.
Yeah, sure. So what was it like having a mother as a yoga teacher? What was that experience like?
It was really cool. Like, it was really, really amazing to grow up around those kind of things. I mean, looking back at the time, when you're a teenage boy and your mom's trying to drag you along to kirtans or stuff like that, you're a bit like, fuck, I just kind of want to go surf or skate or whatever. But it laid a really beautiful foundation to be comfortable in this world around those kind of things, where I think for a lot of people, and maybe for men going into yoga, there's still that stigma of, women and flexibility and all of that. So it was really cool to have a mum who pushed me to inquire into myself at a young age and, explore those kind of teachings and ways of living.
Yeah, sure. And I guess for me, like, I literally never touched on any of that stuff until probably my early 20s, just because I was not exposed to it at all. So do you feel like being exposed to it your whole life has had a massive impact on you, compared to like the most people that probably don't have that sort of inside view of that kind of world?
I think now, reflecting back, I see more of the impact. But I don't think I really dove into it until mid-20s. And it was there, and I kind of knew about it, and it was kind of just simmering in the background of like, but I never really started a regular yoga practice until, mid-20s, and reading the books and that meditation. But I think it had a massive impact in just allowing it to have a very natural progression. Like, it felt very intuitive and very natural beginning to practice and explore that. And now it just feels like it laid a subconscious foundation for being able to be in that kind of discipline. So I think it definitely had a massive impact, but more at a subtle level rather than a really conscious kind of level.
Yeah, sure. I can imagine. I met on the podcast with Joaquin. He said that his mother was, it's sort of very spiritual. He used to push lots of spiritual tech in, but he kind of resented it rather than took it on board at the time. And then he kind of only just realized as he got older, like, he was maybe there was on something back then.
Yeah, I think that's it. I have moments of like, reflecting back to conversations, or, mum pushing stuff on you, and you're like, I get it now. Like, you see it,
Yeah.
But
Mum knows best usually.
Exactly. But it's a funny thing, because I guess when you're at that age, I don't know, at least for me, my mind was just like, surf, skate, be a boy. You don't really want to, I don't know, I think especially growing up in Australia, it's can be quite an isolating country in terms of culture and stuff. And yoga is a very big thing there, and that kind of health. But yeah, it was interesting. I think, like, a lot of my friends or friends' mums were kind of into that world, and you're kind of used to it. But yeah, still as a boy, you're like, no, just leave it alone.
Yeah, for sure. So how long have you lived in the UK now for?
8 years now.
And is it did you move here by yourself, or
Yeah,
with
so I
family?
jumped over here at 20 years old just by myself. Luckily, I had a very close friend who was living over here, and some other people, so it made the transition easy. but it was a whole, literally 6 months, decided to move over. And then 6 months later, I was on a plane with a one-way ticket, um, which was, yeah, it was quite weird. There was, I'd been to London for like a few weeks at 15 years old. So I didn't really know the city. There was just something that was pulling me there. Originally, the move was for music and to explore DJing and running nightclubs and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a bit of a big shift.
Yeah.
In
Tell me more
world.
about the DJ scene.
The
Was that
DJs,
something you actually did, or was it kind of just an idea and then you moved to something else?
no. So for the first 6 years in London, or yeah, 5, 6 years, was DJing, running a record label, club nights, and then during the daytime, it was like working hospitality, as making coffee, and as began to explore cooking as well. So I was DJing in Australia, but that was like, 17, you're doing house parties, 18, you begin to do it in a bit of clubs, and really loved it. And I'd always had a big love for music, but never played instruments. But there was something about combining the energies and rhythms and tones and melodies of different tracks that really captivated me in how you can spin a story and move a room. So I fell into that, and then I had mum's English, so I had the British passport, and London made the most sense because Australia for music is a little bit restricting. So I was like, fuck it, okay, let's go over. And I did a degree or diploma in electronic music production. And then from there, hustled the DJ world, but eventually hit a point after a while of like, this isn't me anymore. A lot of the magic was lost from getting too involved into the business side of things, finding myself going out when you didn't want to go out, and being in clubs till 4, 6 a.m. in the morning when you kind of just want to be at home. So the magic for me was always going out and getting lost in the dance floor and feeling that energy. And yeah, I took a big step back. And then the other day, for the first time in like 3 years, went back into a club, and it was awesome. And now, but I think the skills and what I learned through the time is now something that I can bring into my classes and movement practice of creating a story through movement, through breath, and through sound.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah.
So during the time that you were DJing, like the 5 or 6 years, did you have a kind of a yoga practice there?
Nothing.
No.
So I wasn't doing any. I went from being quite, surfing, skateboarding, moving around heaps a bit, playing as a kid, to moving over here and literally doing nothing for like 5 years or something. And then I remember my housemate was like, I'm going to go for a run one day. And he started running. I was like, physical activity. And then, I mean, the most physical thing that I do is like go dancing for 6-8 hours straight, and yeah, then that slowly began to creep in. But it was a time, like you're out every weekend. Definitely got seduced by the culture of smoking weed and kind of that nightlife, drug culture that's involved in that techno world, and explored a lot of that. And then, yeah, it all came crashing down, and then movement crept its way in. But
do you think? Why do you think so many people that teach yoga now have come from that kind of like hedonistic lifestyle? Like, do you recognize that as well? Because I literally,
yeah, especially in Rocket, it's something I see.
I don't know what it is. Do you think it's like a compulsiveness or like a obsessiveness or a willingness to seek the extremes, so to speak?
That's a good way to put it, a willingness to seek the extremes. I think one thing I found is like, I always remember very clearly my mum saying this to me after speaking to her about like psychedelics and stuff. She's been like, you can achieve a similar state through meditation and through that kind of work. And now after 4 or 5 years of these practices, it's like I'm starting to understand that what she was saying more, where I think psychedelics are great and they're a shortcut. When you do it sober, it's ingrained in you. And I guess why people come from that, I don't know, there's this thing in London with the Rocket of teaching to a lot of techno and rave music, and it's a lot of fun, and somehow it goes hand in hand. But I don't know, it's a question I'm still pondering of like, okay, well, how is, these people coming from that lifestyle and just doing a massive switch? And I guess you're still wanting an extreme or level of intensity of physical movement and sweat, and I guess you bring just a different level of consciousness in it. And from classes I've taught of doing these events in Fabric nightclub, where they have a DJ and a yoga class, it's like there is, I guess, a similarity to the state in which you can achieve through breath and through yoga, that elevated, that euphoric state of mind that you can achieve through dancing and sound on a dance floor, that complete immersion in yourself, and just time stops and lost, and everything, your body is just effortless and light. And I think it's where these qualities begin to weave and tie together that there's the similarities.
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of state is actually the thing that first attracted me to yoga. Like on my first, I'd kind of dabbled before, and then I had my first ever class, and I was on a rooftop in Morocco, so it was kind of like the perfect sort of setting. But it's kind of in the So We Flow story, but like it's the truth. And that was kind of at the end, I was lying in Shavasana, and I was kind of like, holy shit, like I feel insane. I feel like I'm on a different planet right now. And I'd never experienced anything like that before, from purely like being sober and just using my body. And
it's crazy.
I don't think I go there enough, to be honest. Like I think it's when you've more experience, you can almost, what's the word? I guess complacent with your practice and not explore those depths as much, and kind of just go through the motions, and it be just a bit more of like a physical spring clean every day, rather than like actually exploring those areas. But every time I think about it, I'm like, oh, you know what? Like we should go back there more often.
Yeah. But for sure, it can definitely become like, I feel you with that, of getting complacent in your practice, and just treating it like brushing your teeth, which to some degree it is. But, it's also when you take that time to really go into the physical and energetical depths of your body and your being, it's like those shavasanas where your whole body is tingling and you're melting into the floor, and at the same time floating up to the sky. It's like, you're just kind of like, holy shit, this is mad.
Yeah. And you're right. Like like it is like brushing your teeth sometimes, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
No.
But it's just being aware that there is a lot of exploration beyond just physical challenge, that you can go into if you want it as well. Because the beauty of it is that you don't need to be anywhere special. Like if you're already putting aside like half an hour, whatever else for some kind of practice in a day, like that adventure is open to you. And if you want it, like there's no excuse like, I don't have time, like I don't have money, I can't get there in the world. Like it's just there,
you just
right
need a
in
mat
your mind.
Space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's where the breath really ties in as well.
Yeah, I think I agree completely. Like I think one of the most powerful experiences I had was when I did like I did like a Wim Hof foundation course.
Yeah.
And doing I can't remember I guess it's his signature breathwork. I can't remember what it's called, but
it's very similar to what's it called? I just did it this morning.
What's the like trans something or other breathing?
It's like hippo.
Yeah. You got it.
What's it called? It's not. It's like not hyperventilating, but it is hyperventilating. It's called. I remember this now. No, I
We'll
can't
get
remember
it.
what it's
This is why I
called.
need an assistant. I need an assistant to be typing it up.
Like Joe Rogan, every time he's
Yeah.
like, bring it up on the computer.
Yeah, young Jamie.
I wonder what it is. Hypovantic? No, it's definitely not hypovantic breathing.
We'll get it. I'll put it on the screen.
I can't remember.
Letters. But yeah, so do you include
Anyway.
a lot of breath work in your practice that you teach or your own practice? Like, tell me a little more about
It's something I've been exploring. I was always super actually resistant to, if we excluding pranayama out of breathwork for a moment, because they're the same, but for me, they're also different in a way.
that.
Like it is breathwork, but I don't think pranayama is spoken about as breathwork, so to say. I was always super resistant to breath work, even full knowing well its benefits. It was just an area I was like, I can't be bothered to lie down and hyperventilate for like an hour or something. And then, funnily enough, in about maybe a month or two ago, came across this guy through some other resources, and he was doing like a free online breath workshop. I was like, okay, let's sign up and see. It was based in Bali, so I only got to, it was doing the recording. And it was a bit of like, when you go to do something and you don't know why you do it, just something tells you to do it and you find yourself doing it kind of moment. And it was probably the most powerful, one of the most powerful experiences I've had in terms of energetic release, out of body experience, trip, like the sensations afterwards. Went to this state of like, what do they call it, where like you get lobster hands and your whole body cramps up. That,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I don't remember the proper name. Like full cold sweats, everything. You're almost on the borderline of tears. You're screaming, and then like you have this release. And I remember after that, just never having felt so much lightness and contentment and just joy, and then at the same time so much appreciation just for my body and self and that kind of environment that I'm being housed in. And after, even through all psychedelics I've explored, I've never had it where I've literally floated out of my body. And I remember this point in this workshop of like literally coming out and looking down at myself and seeing different layers and just being like, holy shit, you're tripping off your breath. Like this is insane. And then started really getting into it. So I started doing breathwork course, and for the past like 2 or 3 weeks I've just been doing it every morning, exploring different practices. And it's challenging. It brings up a lot of beautiful stuff and at the same time a lot of shit, like, which for me is quite fascinating, how you can explore these beautiful parts of yourself and at the same time these traumas that are just ingrained into your energy without you being there, and be able to work through them just simply through your breath. So yeah, it's something I've been exploring, incorporating into my like morning routine.
And so the course that you did originally, can you recall who the instructor was?
Yeah, so it's by a guy called Brian Kelly, who's based out in Bali and part of this kind of, I guess, collective group called the Yogi Lab. And it kind of brings together like spiritualism, meditation, yoga, and on business and entrepreneurship. And he's got like a 30-day breathwork course, which I signed up for. And it's all on demand, but like it gives you the whole structure of week by week and what to do. And it's, so far I'm loving it. It's really, really good.
And so what's the kind of structure like on a sort of, I guess, like the usual session? Like how long is it, and what kind of practices do you do?
It builds up. So each week you focus on a different breathing style. So the first week was something that he calls euphoric breathing, which is like, it's kind of similar to the one that we were talking before, but it's right, instead of like, it's more like, So there's like a double breath.
Mm-hmm.
So then that builds up. It's like the first day you do 2 rounds of like 2.5 minutes with like a 1 minute breath hold in between. Second day, you're doing like 3.5, then building up 5.5 minutes, all the way up to like sometimes 15 minutes sessions or half an hour long sessions. So it's like a nice gradual increase of building up to it.
Yeah, sure. Because I think for me, like when I'm in a period of doing regular breathwork practices, I love it, but it always seems to slip away. Like it never kind of sticks around like lots of my other kind of, I guess, like good habits, so to speak.
Yeah. I
And I
think it's
just don't know
something
what
that
that
you dip
is.
in and out, no?
Yeah, I suppose. I
Like
don't know. Is it a brushing your teeth every day activity?
I mean, I guess it depends on like your mornings, I think it's very powerful to do that breathing in the morning. But if you're someone that's also, I don't know, like got a family and then you got to go to the office, or, you're in a 9 to 5 job and then squeeze everything else into ask someone to do an hour of breathing each morning is a lot. And I think this is where it's powerful when you can understand these tools and break it down into like 5 to 15 minute sections, so the most you're doing is like 15 minutes to half an hour with the meditation in it. And I think that's where it's because you're still getting the benefits, but because this is always my thing, it's like, great, I want to do it. But on top of teaching and wanting to train and everything, to do an hour each day it's a lot, so I think it's, from what I understand, it's awesome to do a big session like once or twice a month, and then you have your little practices in between. But I'm the same as you. I go through phases of like, really into my pranayama and really into breath, and then it's like I kind of just want to chill and meditate or explore something else.
Yeah, for
You
sure,
know,
sure. So, Rocket, tell us about Rocket. Why Rocket? How did we end up there? What's to love?
I get like, if I take it back to my teacher training, I think I did 2 Ashtanga classes before and going to 200 hour. And then remember going and doing Ashtanga and being like, holy shit, what have I done? What is this training? This practice is, going from having no flexibility and then really falling in love with it and having that practice. And then Rocket's quite a big thing in London. So I began to explore that and just love the energy, the power of it, but also it maintained a lot of the kind of philosophies that Ashtanga has, because it's rooted in Ashtanga. It's just remixed to make it more accessible and playful. And the thing I love about it is it can be, you can follow the sequence and you have your practice, you have this skeleton, this root, but at the same time, you can mold it to your energy or an area that you want to work on that day, I guess, but you have those fundamentals. For me, and that's what I love about it, is like I always have a home to go back to if I'm feeling uninspired. But if I want to get creative, then it's like the sky's the limit. And I love that freedom and at the same time the discipline in it, where for me Ashtanga was very like, I see it, I love it, I know why it has its place, but for me it's very rigid. And coming from someone who, has quite open I guess hamstrings and a back bend, it's like the primary series for me is so restrictive because my hips, I just don't have a lot of external rotation. But then if I look at the secondary series, I'm like, that's more manageable for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being stuck on a pose for 6 months just because your hips don't work in a certain way is like, well, why? Like,
Yeah, sure.
So I think for me, Rocket is like, there's such a beautiful community around it, especially here, the energy that it gives, the discipline, but also the freedom it holds, and the kind of, you can really find this grounding in it, especially if you're going into like Rocket One, which is based off the primary series, or Rocket 2, which is more the secondary with all the back bending stuff. And it's like you can still get those little bits that you love out of Ashtanga, but create it in a way that works for you.
And so it has, how does it work in terms of, like you said, you can obviously go down the rigid option if you want, but there's also that expression kind of exploration side of it. How does that work in like literal terms during a practice?
You have just like in Ashtanga, you have the primary, secondary, the set sequence, so to say, the skeleton. So in Rocket, you have Rocket 1, 2, and 3. And Rocket 1 is like, they're all a bit of a mixture of the primary, secondary, third, and fourth series of Ashtanga. But each one still kind of has a intention and a focus. So it's like you have the set sequence, which you can follow, but then you can add in little bits. So it's like you have the fundamentals, like in Ashtanga, you have the fundamental standing postures, but then it's like you're adding in a half moon or a warrior 3 or, handstands everywhere or different funky variations of stuff.
And that's kind of like accepted as a Rocket teacher, that's what you do? Or is that kind of your interpretation?
No, that's I'm still needing to learn a lot more about, I think, the philosophies, but from the classes, from my understandings, what I've learned in the classes I've gone, it's like creating a remix out of it. There's poses you add in, poses you take out, and I think like a lot of the teachers I go to, it's there's also drawing a lot of influence from Dharma. Mm-hmm. So it's like a Rocket Ashtanga sequence with also Dharma poses chucked into it, but it still follows that structure of the original Rocket sequence. So you kind of know where you're going and where it's leading to, but you're getting to be creative along the way with it.
Yeah, sure. And so from my perspective, I've always thought Rocket as a good practice to do. This is given my like sort of ignorant perception of what it is, because I've never practiced Rocket myself. It's a good practice for someone that really does want to have that balance between like a classics and something, I guess, more contemporary is not the right word, but I guess explorative and creative, more expression, and even like more skill focused. All right, would you say that's true?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a very strong practice with a big focus on like arm balances, inversions, and doing funky weird stuff. But it's good I find it's good for those people that want to have that creative exploration and at the same time maintain that discipline and that kind of I guess routine in a sequence. You're still getting to, I guess one thing I love about it is, you're doing the repetitions and you can see your progress. And I think that's one great thing with Ashtanga, where vinyasa can always be different, which is great, but maybe you're never getting to continuously work on something. Where this, it's like, you're always going to be working on your pincher. You're always going to be working on crow pose or triangle or whatever it is. And then you can add in what you feel free in a sense.
Yeah, I guess whether it's purposeful or not, it takes that kind of concept of almost like progressive calisthenics or like gymnastics by that repetition.
Exactly. And that's what, a big tagline is progressive Ashtanga, the Rocket Vinyasa yoga system.
Oh, nice. I like it. So, I'm going to go for like a deep one now, kind of. So why it's movement, and it can just be yoga or movement in general. Why is it important to you, Miles?
It's been a big vehicle in being able to explore myself and be able to give back into the world in a way of assisting others come into their bodies. For me, it's I guess it was given birth out of aesthetics, and along the way it's become much more of a medicine of, using the movements to challenge my mind, to see the edges of both my physical and psychological limits, and just to maintain a certain level of health and well-being within both my body and my mind. And I think, you go through phases where it's a lot and there's lethargy, and then there's phases where you're just motivated. And for me, it's just a tool to really challenge and explore myself and to connect deeper into my body. And that's really been such a big practice of mine, of getting out of my head and back into that kind of root of being, into that body. And for me, it's been a combination of like yoga, of hand balancing, of calisthenics, and each offering something different and unique as a vehicle to get into the deeper roots of the self. And through the movement, really, I guess especially in yoga, is seeing the kind of psychological patterns that come up. It's, where is the mind in a pose? What are you working with? And I see this, I guess the most prominent is like in inversions. If your mind is distracted, there's not the focus to really maintain or work into the position. So for me, what's really interesting with movement is and more so in yoga, is like, you can really come to understand where your mind is, how your energy is, and it's tuning into those subtleties to push, but also listen to what you maybe need in that moment and in that day. I've had a friend talking to me a lot about this recently, of like, our world is so yang and my nature is very yang, and the importance of coming back into that yin state and challenging yourself in, I think those yin practices just as hard as the yang ones, getting yourself to sit still and be just in a pose, and that kind of breath and nature of it. And I think in yoga, especially, the poses just offer that space to really dive in. How are you reacting towards a pose? How is the mind when you're in it? Are you wanting to leave it? It's one of my teachers. You would have gone, maybe Stuart Gilchrist.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And at the end of practice, he always makes you hold shoulder stand for 2 to 3 minutes. And I fucking hate it. But it's always like, it's a moment of like, all right, why I'm here? Where else do I need to go? Why am I resistant to this pose? And then in the same breath, it's like, is this pose serving me? What's it offering to me today? I think that's something I like to entwine, is like, it's listening, but then also observing that urge to maybe be resistant to pose just because it's hard, or you don't want to do it, or you don't think you're good at it, or something.
Yeah,
So,
I completely agree with everything you've said. I think it would be the way I'd actually describe it personally as well. I think I've always been interested in the kind of the difference between what we'd, I guess, in the last few years call like movement, exercise, and how movement, I guess it is that kind of, it's part of everything else, isn't it? It's like your connection to yourself, but it fits in with like everything else in your life, and like that balance. Whereas exercise is like quite, I guess, like, I don't want to like paint exercise with a bad brush or whatever, but because I don't think that at all, but it is kind of like quite narrow-minded in its purpose. Whereas I think movement is about like connecting with like who we are and like the living being that we are, and like nothing else can quite do that. And that's what I think is like the beauty of it, really. And yeah, go on, go.
No, go.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting what you said about like these things that we go through in our minds when we say like in a posture we don't like, or that feels uncomfortable, but in a few months, like that can be a posture that we look forward to, and what's going on there. And it is, a lot of the times, like say I wake up in the morning, it's, I usually get up at like 5 a.m. to do a practice because that's when I can fit it in. And some mornings I'm like, man, I want to, all I do right now is just sit in a forward fold for like 15 minutes. Like I can't manage doing anything. I don't want to do anything strenuous. And then there's like then there's like the exercise side of my mind that starts going, no, you need to do a strenuous practice. And it's like these two sides of like, am I being lazy or do I actually need like this restfulness right now? Like, and knowing the difference is, I don't know if it's something you can ever master, but you can get better at it for sure. But it's so difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the practice in itself is, tuning into what's real, what's not, what's lazy, what's unlazy, and there's such this aspect of like, do. You have to train for 3 hours, bringing it back to that. And it has to be vigorous and intense. And it's like, sometimes you just need to fucking lie over a bolster and put your head down and reset, and that's maybe going to do more. Sure, let's say you're not going to sweat or burn the calories or whatever it is in the physical aspect, but you're going to do so much more energetically for yourself to actually feel better. I think we're in this weird world and transition of there's still this kind of thing around exercise of for the aesthetic, to burn, to look good or whatever. And bring it back to that point of what you quoted online is like moving to feel good, not training to look good, but training to feel good in your body. And, some days that's going to be 2 hours or an hour, half an hour of stretching and yin. That's what your body needs to reset. Other days you're going to be able to do handstand practice and yoga for 3 hours or something. And as you say, it's a very fine line of like allowing and accepting what you need and at the same time pushing. And I don't think we ever know. It's just trial and error.
No.
But then there's those times when maybe you really don't want to, and then you get onto the mat and you're like, you find this space of flow that's just amazing.
Yeah, that's literally what I was about to say. I was like, sometimes you have that feeling of not wanting to do, and then you do, and before you know it, you're doing the most like vigorous practice you've done in weeks, and it feels amazing.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I almost always have that feeling of, oh yeah, but what if I get into it and it's awesome? But I guess it's hard and it's a learning curve. And I think most people will have not started their sort of movement interest through like the sort of practice that we're talking about now. Like most people in the UK and in the Western countries will have started through exercise of some form or sport, right?
Yeah, through running or athletics or gym or whatever.
So changing that mindset, or at least like exploring it, I think is going to be a challenge for like most people, really.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think living your life always having that exercise mindset, if you are exploring things like yoga and stuff, is always going to hold you back. And I think it might reap physical rewards and even like health rewards, but I think you're always selling yourself short if you don't let yourself have those moments of like downtime, have those, and trust your kind of instinct and the messages that your body's signaling to you.
Yeah. I mean, you need those, we can look at rest days as a sign of weakness, but if you're training intelligently, it's like you need those at least one day of just nothingness or light stretching or whatever, just like, every 6-7 weeks you need what do you call it? Like a down week, deregulation week of light training. Because if you're just smashing your body, 365 days of the year, you're just destroying yourself and you're never going to have progress. There's not the space for the body to recover. And I think this ties into like how we are in the West with work ethics and stuff like that, is like go, 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 push, do as much as you can. And then that flows into the gym. From having worked in a yoga studio, it's in terms of like being on front of house, it's interesting seeing what styles attract different energies and mindsets. And, there's definitely like people that come in and do 3 hours of like back to back intense, vigorous classes. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's cool. But do you need that? What is that actually serving? But then that's so subjective as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's having that down and chill out time, whether that's like, maybe your practice one day is just 10 minutes on a bolster in child's pose. And that's amazing.
Yeah. I think I've learned to not, oh, well, I'm learning to accept that and feel good about it as well. And I guess through most of my life, I probably felt guilt's probably not the right word, but like a bit unsatisfied, I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe unsatisfied and unfulfilled, and maybe like the day hadn't been a success because of that. But
Yeah, I
now
completely relate to that.
but I think I'm definitely getting better at even just saying, oh, I've been out for like a 15-minute walk today, like in nature, and that feeling just fulfilled from that as just the only sort of movement that I do in a day. And it's quite a journey to get to that point, but when you do, it's amazing.
It's so freeing. And I can imagine having like, starting a family now and everything. It's like completely shifting that mindset
Yeah,
of
because you
like,
can't do what you used to do.
so you almost become more grateful for those little moments where you actually get to move and just be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the main challenges for people that like say become parents or like, I don't know, take on any kind of new responsibility in their lives. They look on the way it used to be, like almost as if it was like with rose tinted glasses, basically. That was the only way it can be. And if it can't be that way, then it's better doing nothing at all, kind of thing. Whereas you have to you have to make the present as good as it can be with like what you have available, rather than just seeing the past as the kind of structure that it always had to be.
Yeah. Well, we can very easily fall into that trap of like all or nothing. You know what I mean? Whereas like, I don't know, especially having a kid, if you get to do 15, half an hour practice a day, that's awesome. If you get to do 3 hours, then it's a giant treat. But I've like seen this where, guy back home in Australia had like triplets, and he's a movement coach. So he's like raising 3 kids at the same time, trying to run a studio and coach people. And it's you have such a big shift when you have like a kid come into your life, and a few students of that. It's like you see such this dynamic of like looking after the kids, feeding them, going to school, then trying to like just get that hour in for you, which is such, or half an hour, whatever it is, which is such vital. But even that 5-10 minutes of like, what you said, just walking outside, even though it's a simple human action movement, is such a vital component to mental health and physical health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all depends on like kind of what sort of parent you want to be as well, right? Like you could literally, I guess like traditionally, like the man would be out of the house all day, so like you could go do whatever you wanted, but that's not the way that the world's working anymore, or at least for those that want to. And I mean, for me, like I try to be there as much as I can. So going out, say, I mean, on the more extreme end, it might be going for a surf, right? Because we live like right next to the beaches. So, but a surf's difficult because with the drive-in, with the kit, with everything, like you might be gone for 3 hours, and that's quite a selfish use of your time, I guess, because if you did an hour's yoga, that would be that, wouldn't it? You can, an hour's an hour, but yeah, so you have to, it teaches you to really appreciate the time that you do have, for sure.
I guess if it's that seventh series in Ashtanga, family life.
So I guess I've heard the sort of same thing from teachers before, though, that they get overwhelmed by their actual teaching, and then their actual practice sort of
goes
falls
out
by
the
the
window.
wayside.
Yeah, fully. I mean, I had that recently of like coming back after travels and studios open and just going full force, and then just like, hold on a second, like, you don't. Somehow I ended up back teaching 23 classes a week. I was like, no, I can't do this. And you don't want to practice yoga because you're spending so much time telling people to do yoga that by the time you want to roll out your mat, it's like, I just want to fucking lie down or do something else. Which I think you go through phases. Like a lot of the moment stuff I'm exploring now is way more gymnastics and calisthenics and hand balancing, because it's what's feeling good in my body, other than still working with yoga, but less in the asana and more in the meditation and breathing. But yeah, it's definitely such a fine balance between your self-practice and teaching. And I have it where friends are like, oh, you're easy, you work like you're only teaching 3-4 classes a day. It's like, yeah, but in that hour or 90 minutes, whatever it is, you're holding space for 10 to 30 people. And, it's not like you're just sitting down having a tea and a conversation. It's like you're fucking directing your voice, you're touching people, and there's such a big energetical transaction. And, I think it's being so in tune, what can you offer in terms of assist, and really being aware of the energy you're giving and holding some of that energy so that you can then, go and explore your practice, because all those experiences and what you learn through your own practices making you a better teacher. So if you begin to neglect that, it's like you're just teaching on auto mode, which London, it's a tricky balance.
Why do you say that?
I just think here it's such a hustle in the teaching world, and I think I've been very fortunate to get quite quickly to where I want to be within the space of only teaching for like 2.5 years. But I also, saw that side where a lot of studios still pay £30, I guess. And that's, each their owners bringing that, but it's like, because of the cost of living in London, it can be, you got to teach 20 to 30 classes a week just to maybe, have the life that you want to live. I think this is why before COVID, I was teaching 25 classes a week plus, working in a studio and in the front of house. And I was destroyed by the time the pandemic hit. And the pandemic is, gave me space to go, actually, how do I want to teach? What kind of teacher do I want to be? Which is why I started exploring more trainings and now personal coaching with calisthenics and handstands and that. And I love it, but it's like I saw that side of like it's a hustle, and I had a few friends move out because of it gets too much. So yeah, it's tricky. It's a delicate balance that I think you go in and out of and fluctuate between.
Yeah, I mean, £30 an hour is just not enough, is it, for something that where you're giving out so much energy? Like, I think even from doing the few episodes of this podcast, I've realized how tiring it is to just like converse and give out things for an hour. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think because as a teacher, you have like there's a physical element to it as well, and also like I guess like a deeper emotional and spiritual element of giving as well. And to get, I know, £30 an hour to do that, and you might even be teaching for 90 minutes, right? So it's just not enough, is it? It just isn't enough.
No, it's quite a shame. Like, I don't know, when you see studios that have quite expensive memberships doing that, or just like devaluing, charging cheap memberships and then devaluing the teachers, and putting other rewards programs where students can leave tips, and there's just not value in what you do, and it makes you as a teacher not feel valued in what you're doing. And it's like, if you add in your training time, cycling between studios or getting around on that, travel to and between the actual classes, like it's a 12 to 16 hour day, each of physical movement, and you get to the end and you're just destroyed. So it's a tricky thing of like that, I think Norman Blair did a big post on this like last year or something, of like the pay structure of a lot of studios, and it's raised a lot of good points and questions of like, okay, what's a fair amount and how do you value that? And London has this weird thing of like, I saw this coming from Australia when working hospitality, where in Australia you get really good money from working hospitality. Like at 18, you're, the equivalent of £15 an hour. And then you're coming over here and you're literally getting half that. And that's, back then in 2013 or something, it was like $7.50 an hour. And it was like, what the fuck? But then you go out and a pint is like £6. So it's a weird thing. And notice that in the yoga world, it's like, you need to be teaching a lot or have another job if you're just in those studios that are paying that much. So
I mean, it's hard. It's hard on the other side of it as well, because it's hard for people that want to practice as well. Because I mean, obviously we won't name any studios on either side of the sort of scale, but many studio prices are just completely inaccessible to the normal person. And I spent most of my life in London never going to a studio practice, even though I had like the amazing studios around me. And it was only in the last like 3 or 4 years that I actually started going to a studio.
Well, it's hard, exactly. And it's such I've always find it quite an interesting conversation, because it's so gray in that, okay, you need to have the facilities, and running a studio is expensive, and paying the teachers and putting on, but then a lot of those memberships add up and it's really expensive. And then it's like, on the other scale, if you do it cheaper, it's then you can't obviously afford to pay the teachers more, but then you make it more accessible. So it's like this weird, in the more expensive ones, you kind of get this. I have, friends that it's like they won't go because they can't afford it. So they go to other ones, but then maybe the quality or something is less than. So it's like, how do you then facilitate both things? Because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, this should be accessible for everyone, I guess. But then if you're charging upwards of like 150 to 250 pounds in a membership, it's, if you're paying that on top of, 700 to 1,000 pounds of rent in London, it's a lot. Yeah, everything else, socializing, eating, it's crazy.
Yeah, and then the studios that aren't so expensive, which I think as a client, a customer, like they're amazing, because they're opening up like this world to people who wouldn't be able to afford to go to the higher end studios. But conversely, like,
exactly,
how does that work with a business model with the teachers and everything? I guess it's almost the Uber scandal of yoga.
Exactly. It's tricky, because it opens. I've had this conversation with a few teachers. You have those more low budget studios where it's like people can go and practice and get introduced into that world, and maybe then they do progress into going into more high-end studios. But it's then, how does that relate exactly into a business model and providing value to staff and teachers and stuff? So I mean,
I wonder if it's something to do with, if we say compare it to like gym memberships, right? Like gyms they've got a lot longer they're more established businesses, right, over time, and they've probably got a lot more funding because it's more to the mainstream, so they can they can afford to offer better value to people because they have that sort of capital. They have the huge facilities. They have a bigger membership like uptake. Whereas like the small, even the big yoga studios, like they're still small in the grand scheme of things, aren't they? So I guess it's always going to be a lot tighter.
I mean, that's the tricky thing. It's like a gym, you know, okay, maybe they have a few classes, but generally it's like you go, you know what I mean? So there's a bit more space to facilitate endless clientele. I think a yoga studio can, but then you're focusing on classes which can only have a certain amount of people in. Like even the bigger studios, you can max fit like 60 to 80 people in, you know? So then how that's nowhere near as scalable as like a gym membership where you just have people join and they go whenever they want.
Yeah, so, and I've heard. I mean, you can probably tell me better, but I've heard that some of the gyms actually pay way better than the yoga studios.
Some do, some don't.
Yeah,
like
so
I know quite a few gyms that pay more because they can, and then there's another like section of gyms again which pay less than what yoga studios pay.
So I guess it's a fine balance of keeping everyone involved happy, like the teachers, the customers, the business owners, like.
And you're never going to win.
No. But yeah, I guess like moving towards doing your own things is the way to do it, right?
Yeah, and I think this is what's interesting with the pandemic is it's a bit bittersweet, but it gave teachers the ability to take things into their own hands more, to cut out that middleman and, you know, create content online, do online classes. Like I have a friend, she just travels around with her online community. She teaches 5 classes a week and that sustains her to move around, and she just focuses on that.
It gave people that push, didn't it? Like it gave people the push to do something that they maybe wouldn't have taken the leap of faith on in normal circumstances.
Yeah, because you have no choice. But I think it depends, you know, like for me, I very quickly realized like, okay, I don't mind doing online, but it's not my thing. Like I don't like to teach staring into a computer screen. I need that human connection. For some people it works, and, you know, it gives you the freedom and ability to be essentially wherever you want in the world, which is amazing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's pros and cons of both. But it's definitely been, I think, for those that jumped on board and really took that time to look at how they want to teach, it's been quite an empowering thing.
Yeah, sure. And I think that brings us nicely on to kind of the close for this podcast. So where can people find what you're doing? And have you got any workshops coming up? Where can people find your classes? Instagram, all that sort of thing?
All my classes are online. Sorry, not online, on my website. So I'm teaching Indaba, Block, doing a bit of handstand PT at Lift in London, Dig Me Fitness, Kindred. I'm teaching a rocket masterclass this Saturday at Kindred, which is great. And then I've got an upcoming training with Joaquin in November, which is focused on inversions. And then, we've got a good few things coming up in store for next year.
Amazing,
so it's all on website and Instagram.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Miles. It's been an awesome conversation.
Thank you, Jake.
I've really enjoyed it.
Likewise, man. It's been a good way to start the day.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you.
Thanks, dude.